Should be.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order for the Parks and Recs and Intergenerational Service Commission for June 5th, 2018. We'll go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Sandoval will go ahead and lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll go ahead and move on to roll call.
Commissioner Price, Chairperson Munguia Esquivel,
Here.
Commissioner Hargrove,
Present.
Commissioner Sandoval,
Here.
Commissioner Ahmad, Commissioner Clayton,
Here.
Commissioner Early. We have a quorum.
So I'd like to go ahead and introduce our new alternate commissioner, Sasha Horwitz. He will be joining us, the commission, this year. So tonight's agenda is available on the counter along with the request to speak cards. A reminder to everyone that requests to speak cards should be completed and turned in to the clerk prior to the completion of any staff presentation. For the speakers wishing to speak on items not on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of this commission, please write item number on your card, and all speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and televised, so all speakers, in order to be recognized, must be called on by the chair and come forward to the microphone. Speaking in public may cause some individuals to be uncomfortable, so everyone is asked to be professional and respectful at all times. At this moment, we do have someone from the public who would like to speak. I will go ahead and call Larry Langford up to the podium.
Good afternoon and happy Election Tuesday. Hope everyone's doing well. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm an almost 60-year resident of West Sacramento, a native here, played Little League Baseball. My kids have played it as well, still live here. I just had a couple questions regarding Memorial Park, home of West Sacramento Little League. A couple of council meetings ago, 2 or 3 of them, I believe city staff had commented that they had budgeted $1 million for the adhering to the ADA compliance for Memorial Park. And at this point, they had set aside $225,000 for consultant fees. The staff also commented that they were $300,000 over budget on the refinance or the reclamation of the ADA appliances for Memorial Park. I'm just curious to know how they could be already, without even putting a shovel in the ground, $300,000 over budget. So if that could be addressed at some point, I would gladly love to listen to it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So that is part of the director's report that we have on the agenda. Is there an opportunity to speak on behalf of that now, or should we wait until it's time for that?
Thank you, Vice Chair. It's totally up to the commission whether you would like to hear that portion of the director's report now or defer it until its normal time. I'm happy to give it whenever at the pleasure of the commission.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and do it now.
Great. So as you may recall, the Memorial Park we have to do some ADA requirements to that park because of a litigation that occurred several years ago. And we did go to bid for a consultant to actually design and do the engineered drawings. That's the $221,000 that the gentleman referred to. It's for architectural design and engineering that is required in order to construct the improvements. The additional $300,000 that was requested as of part of the budget this year was based on the architectural's estimates of what the potential of the project could cost. So in order to make sure that those funds were reserved during the budget cycle, because the CIP is only allocated annually by council, we put a place saver in for that additional $300,000. We won't know the exact construction costs, obviously, until we go to bid. The project is currently under design. Staff will be meeting with the architectural firm next week on the 13th to see the initial preliminary designs. We will also be meeting with West Sacramento Little League on the 19th of June to share those preliminary designs and alternatives with them. And then we also have a public meeting for all the stakeholders that we're actually going to have at the park itself with big boards so people can look at the field and look at what they have proposed to be able to really understand, because there's going to be options available. Some of those options will be driven obviously by fiscal constraints, whether or not we'll be able to do them or not. And that meeting, I think, is scheduled for July 6th, tentatively July 6th at Memorial Park. So that gives you a little bit of an update there. That work is continuing. We are on schedule to be able to have those improvements completed before the deadline that is required in the litigation. And the best news of all is we've been able to work the schedule so that there will be no interruptions to West Sacramento Little League games this year. There wasn't any, as you know. And next year, they will do all of the construction around West Sacramento Little League's schedule. So Little League is alive and well at Memorial Park and will continue to be alive and well at Memorial Park through the construction next year. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Yeah, Commissioner Hargrove.
Cindy, you said, so back on the 300K, you said, you used that jargon that I just don't know what is, CIP?
That's capital improvement, thank you. Thank you. Capital improvement projects.
So the 300K is not over budget per se, it's
No.
just you got 300K early to make sure that you can do the schedule?
Not to do the schedule. The part of the request for proposals was to put in a preliminary budget of the project. Based on what has to be done there, they're guesstimating that the construction cost, that the total project cost would be $1.3 million. We only set aside $1 million. So we're setting aside an additional $300,000 so that we make sure and have enough money, so you're right in this case, so that we don't have to wait a whole nother year to finish construction because we didn't budget it in the capital improvement budget. So we've retained that $300,000. The good news is if it comes in lower than $1.3 million, then that money is returned to the CIP and programmed into other projects for the city. If the estimates come in higher, then we may have to look at some of the options that have been identified to implement those improvements. As you know, the ball fields are a real concern to the community because of those historical dugouts, and they're looking at very specific options about how we can do ADA improvements with those dugouts and try to retain some of that historical nature of them, like having them half-filled and things, and ramps and things of that nature that can be very costly. So we wanted to make sure we had enough options so that we could, A, fulfill our requirements under the litigation, but hopefully retain some of that historical value that everyone loves about that park.
And then just on funding, there was a lot of discussion, I know, about private fundraising efforts. Are you aware of any? Are you working with folks on some of the private fundraising? Because I know
Yes.
there's some add-ons that folks are looking at.
That is
happening?
correct. So we've been in very close contact with West Sacramento Little League, and in fact, I assisted them personally in writing a grant to the Honda Corporation for $50,000. They've not heard yet, but they did get the grant submitted. Little League, I think, is going to target fundraising for the historical snack shack that they've had. We did include it in our engineer's estimates for the $1.3 million that we talked about earlier. Does include a combination snack shack, bathroom, but it's just a shell. It doesn't include any of the amenities that they're going to need to make it a real snack shack. So my understanding is West Sacramento Little League will be fundraising to help pay for the snack shack and the amenities that need to be inside of that.
Larry, did that answer your question?
Are there any other questions by commissioners?
Is there going to be any delay in, or any problems with winter ball?
Winter ball may have some problems, depending on the construction schedule and if we can get it done in time next summer. You know, once Little League ends, and then winter ball begins. So there might be some problems to winter ball, but we are still trying to work around that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great, thank you so much for that update, and we can resume back to the director's report when we get to that part of the agenda. At this moment, we'll go ahead and move on to Part 1B, and that's commission communications. Are there any commissioners that would like to provide an update or report on any activities or events that they have attended? Seeing none, okay. Go ahead and move on to presentations. At this point, the Greater Sacramento Softball Association grant presentation will not be today. So the presenter was out sick, and so we will try to see if that presentation can come by at a later date. Number 3, Annual Senior Resource Fair Update by Christine Prater. Would you like to come up?
Hello, I'm Christine Prater. I'm the Recreation Supervisor for the City of West Sacramento. I run social recreation programs. I provide experiences for seniors. And one of the things we do each year, which is a big highlight of my programming, is the Senior Resource Fair, which is held each year the first Friday in May. Well, this last I was planning on presenting this prior to the Senior Resource Fair and inviting you, but our meeting was postponed until now. So now what I came here is to tell you about this, an update for our past Senior Resource Fair, which was the 6th Annual Senior Resource Fair held on May 4th, 2018. The purpose of our Senior Resource Fair is to honor our treasured older Americans here in West Sacramento, and I'm going to tell you a few of the highlights that we had at this year's fair, and then you're going to get a visual, you get to see a video, because it's much better to see a video than to hear me talk, because you got to live it. So on that note, we had approximately 190 attendees in the building at the Senior Resource Fair, which is very amazing. About 95 of those were seniors themselves. We had 45 vendors who were represented during the fair itself. Those vendors range from primarily nonprofit agencies, Yolo County agencies, West Sacramento agencies, and things that will help benefit seniors in their life and living. And then we also had some for-profit vendors, but during the fair, for-profit vendors are not allowed to sell anything or to arrange a sale for a future date. They're usually doing things like, they just really love to be there and be with their client, with the seniors. So, okay, so some of the highlights included, we had VSP there, which is Vision Service Providers. They gave 35 vouchers away to seniors in West Sacramento who can get free eye classes and free eye exam. Another highlight was our free blood pressure clinic provided by Walgreens, so a senior just can come in and check their blood pressure and get some advice about that. Free hearing tests, voter registration table. Raffle was provided where we sought donations by several different entities, and we provided a free raffle for the seniors. And really cool thing this year, which was new, we had a canine demonstration from West Sac PD. So I believe it was Canine Bolo was on the side yard, actually showing his stuff. He was adorable. We had Russian and Spanish translators available, and I wanted to also, prior to watching the video, to invite you to next year's Senior Resource Fair, which will be May 3rd, 2019, and we'll give you more details of that prior to it happening next year. And at this point, we would like to watch the video, and then afterwards, I'd love to answer any questions you have.
This is one of the highlights, I think, of the year, is to have this wonderful program put together. And we're proud of all the partnerships that we have. It's not just the city that makes things happen, but it's also folks like you and like folks who are coming here today to showcase some of the services and programs they have.
This recognizes the contribution that seniors are making to our community, and I think the efforts that we are making to make life better for seniors. We work really hard, councils work really diligently to reach out to the community and to incorporate a lot of your ideas into the plan and to create a document that really makes the city accountable to the community to deliver those results. We hope you'll continue to provide that input and really give us and the council the guidance to tell us what you need.
So another thing I wanted to mention is that the fair is put on in partnership with BB Can Bright Broderick Community Action Network. And our chair for the fair is Charlotte Dorsey, who is an amazing citizen of West Sacramento and always is just tremendously helps all of the seniors with all of their needs. So she is our rock, and we love her. So on that note, would you have any questions for me? I'd love to answer them.
So I have a question. I don't know if it's specific to the fair, but I know it's recently we had some interaction with AARP on the mobility scooters. Have those been out yet? Have those been shared with anyone yet?
I'm actually not sure what the mobility scooters are, but I would love to get that answer for you.
Okay.
If that would be something, that's probably something I'm not assisting with.
Okay.
Actually, there was an article in the paper yesterday on it, in the Bee. So, yeah, they're kind of out and about, but
Okay, so Matthew.
Excuse me, Vice Chair, if I may, are you referring to the jump bikes, the electronic bicycles, or are you referring to
the red
a
one.
different avenue?
No, not the jump bikes. It was discussed at the last council meeting, and I thought it was with the AARP and doing mobility scooters along with the mobility transportation plan.
Oh, yeah, that would be John Robinson. We're more than happy to get with
Okay,
John
so that's-
Robinson and get an
that's not
update on
under
that
your
for you.
umbrella.
Yeah, we're happy to get an update on you
Okay.
for that.
Not a problem, thank you, Matthew. I apologize for not having that information for you.
Sorry, I just
No,
connected
we'll get it to
AARP
you.
with that.
Well, yeah, it's likely very connected.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question. There was a lot of good resources there at this once-a-year gathering. Is there a place where seniors can go on an ongoing basis, maybe pop in and maybe get the voucher for VSP or know about the services that are here for them?
Yes, that's a very good comment and question. I actually have a staff member, her name's Irene Santiago, and her main goal during the day is to provide seniors with resources and information. She's actually at our center 5 hours a day, and she does a full range of things. If you come to her and you have visual impairment, she will actually help you write out your application. She will write it for you. If you are having trouble with housing, we're Parks and Recreation. Do we have housing assistance there? No, but we will research and find an answer or try to point you in that right direction. So her title is actually Information and Assistance Specialist, and she really lives that job. Everybody pretty much is familiar with her name. She's a lifesaver.
Thank you. That's fantastic to hear.
It is. And if you ever know of any resources that we can incorporate for referrals within our center, we're happy to take them. So.
Thank you.
Any questions on this side? No? Thank you for that presentation and that update. I had the chance to go last year with my mom, and she was new to West Sacramento, so it was such a great opportunity for her to come and see all the resources that the city can provide to someone her age. So thank you so much for that. I'm curious to know what are the most sought-out resources that people lean towards?
Through Irene, there's housing, transportation, some of the seniors, maybe they're having financial difficulties. We have a lawyer's clinic. We work with High Cap, and they come in our building and take appointments. So we really do have a full range of services and issues that seniors deal with. But they're, for Irene directly, those things. But again, we also have the lawyer's clinic, and we work with the DA's office. Sometimes we have to call APS, which is Adult Protective Services. We've had to go as far as to do home safe visits and things of that nature. So it's a full range. We are Parks and Recreation, but we also provide this social need for the seniors because it's something that's needed.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
There's one more question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And to reach you guys, is the phone number on the bottom of this flyer here?
Yes.
Okay.
And I put extra on the counter, and if anybody needs any, if they contact us, I can get them on a free mailing list and/or point them in the right direction.
Awesome, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and then we'll go ahead and move on to the approval of the minutes of the March 6, 2018 special meeting. Can I get a motion?
I'll motion.
Second
Motion by Commissioner Sandoval, seconded by Commissioner Clayton. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No? We'll move on to the regular agenda. So we'll go on to number 5, second workshop on Parks and Open Space Master Plan by Tracy.
Good evening, Vice Chair, members of the Commission. I'm Tracy Michael, Business Manager for the Parks and Rec Department. And this is the second workshop item on the Parks and Open Space Master Plan update effort, similar to the first workshop that was held with this commission back in March of this year. We have a summary presentation of additional information collected to date, as well as some key findings. At the last workshop, we were focused primarily on demographic and trends information, as well as sharing the results of a variety of survey instruments that were administered. And the focus this evening is on our level of service analysis and how we use the information to start thinking about how we marry our existing and future park inventory with the community needs. I'm joined this evening by Michael Svets with PRIS Consulting, the firm that was selected to help us update our Parks and Open Space Master Plan. And so I'm going to turn it over to him now for the presentation, and I'll be available afterwards for questions.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you for the opportunity to be in front of you all again. Appreciate the opportunity to kind of give you an update, and I think that's the one thing that we wanted to make sure that we committed to you along the way, was to not just kind of hit you all at the end with a whole bunch of key findings and recommendations. So this is really kind of more key findings and maybe some dot connecting as we start to walk through, as Tracy mentioned, the level of service analysis, some gap analysis, and then some of the next steps that we will walk through. So I'll make sure I can get this thing to work. Okay. So just as a reminder, the first couple slides are just reminders, the process that we're going through, and then a summary of kind of the key findings from the public input component. So, of course, it's a matter of really where are we today, where are we going, and how do we get there? I want to pause here for a quick second because Tracy and staff have done a tremendous job over the last, I want to say 6 weeks, but it feels more like 6 months, gathering a whole lot of information related to the park system that maybe just was not captured previously. So as we kind of entered the effort of establishing your existing park inventory and where all your parkland is, and where it potentially is going to be, There was, I think, a good, solid foundation of which that information existed. However, not all of it actually existed within the city's GIS system. So over the last 6 weeks, 8 weeks, there's been a huge effort on staff's part to get this right. And it's really important to understand what your inventory is right now to really kind of establish what your needs are going forward. Sounds very simple and very logical, but it's a very critical step. And so the establishment of that information, though that effort was very intensive, that information will live digitally for the city to work with. And it really is important to establish kind of where we're going and, importantly, how do we get there. So the community needs component, this is just a reminder of kind of the synthesis of data that we heard in talking with staff from the statistically valid surveys, the intercept surveys. This was all very community-driven. And so the first step here is, I maybe have skipped over, maybe I did not. Okay. The first one is really about your parks, the infrastructure. So what are the things that people would like to see within your system? Walking and biking trails is number one. I'd love to say that this is unique to West Sacramento, but it is not. In dozens of master plans that I've done throughout the country, as well as a ton of statistically valid surveys that our subcontractor had done, ETC Institute out of Olathe, Kansas. Walking and biking trails is the number one requested activity and/or amenity that you will find throughout the country. Whether it's in the Midwest, where there's snow on the ground for 7 months a year, or whether it's in California, where you have the opportunity to use it 12 months of the year. Another couple of things I just wanted to point out, open space conservation areas with trails was also very high. Swimming pools, water parks, splash pads, covered picnic areas, large community parks, which I'll talk to you about here in a bit, and also kind of some shaded play areas. What you typically see is at the top, you see activities or amenities, so to speak, that you see a lot of people being able to use in the community. So whether it's families, whether it's young adults, whether it's teens, whether it's middle-aged, whether it's active older adults, there are typically amenities that you will see at the top of the prioritized needs that appeal to the greater majority of your community. As you start to work down the list, you start to get into a little bit more specificity of interest, recreation activity interest, and/or specific age groups. Again, it's not to say that things are at the low end of the spectrum you don't do. It's just that you're very strategic in terms of where you do them. So, of course, boat launching facilities, A, don't appeal to everybody, but B, you can't put them everywhere. Same thing with equestrian trails, same thing with pickleball courts. It's just a matter of making sure that you have an understanding of how you strategically meet that need. It just means that you're not going to invest in that throughout through every park in your system. So when we talk about programs and services, when we started to synthesize the needs, I think when we talked to you last time, adult fitness and wellness programs was at the top. When we started to hear from the community through intercept surveys, that got bumped to number 2. Community special events was number 1. And whether these are special events in which the city issues permits or whether the city directly facilitates and puts them on, they kind of all fall into one big category. So again, the same thing applies here. You will see a lot of activities at the top that are really driven towards families and/or have a huge potential use by your community. You're a very family-driven community, and so you would expect to see activities related to kids and families at the top. Again, same thing as you move through the medium and the lower priorities. It's not that you don't offer them, it's just that you're not going to offer them every day, every week, every month of the year.
Excuse me?
Yes?
What you said, after you did some intercept surveys?
Correct.
What's an intercept survey?
An intercept survey is, we offered the survey online for an open-ended survey, but we also collected surveys at special events, at the community center, at the recreation center, where people could, just kind of randomly fill them out. So it wasn't that controlled environment of the statistically valid survey.
And then, sorry, Madam Chair, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just before we get too far from here. So the community special events, you said that's permitted events?
They're permitted events and/or events that the department puts on or the city puts on itself.
So is that everything from like a concert at the barn to
Yep.
a beer festival to
Absolutely.
A parade for Columbus Day?
Correct.
All those things?
An Earth Day, a tree planting, anything in which you're encouraging the community more or less free of charge to kind of participate, and/or it's a small fee. Okay. All right, so the next set is really about your system. And so before I kind of dive into it, I wanted to walk you through kind of the different park classifications that exist. One of the things that sometimes we get caught up in when we talk about parks is we think about a specific park and we think every park should have all those amenities in it. So there are different park classifications, and it's important to understand what the different purposes are of parks and why they're designed differently, the sizes and shapes and so on and so forth. So the first one is really pocket parks. These are, and I want to preface this by saying every park, we will provide classification guidelines, but we will also provide design guidelines. You will see kind of as we go through these classifications, one component on every slide, which is design. And we encourage all parks to be designed through a set of guidelines called Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. The acronym is CPTED, and the idea is to design parks, design trails, so that you basically have the ability for them, number one, to be activated, so that you have good eyes on parks and good eyes on trails. But then number two, that they're designed in such a way from a lighting perspective, a view shed perspective, to be able to, prevent crime through the design. I mean, not to, beat the acronym up, but anytime you're encouraging folks in public spaces, you want to ensure that your park is designed correctly, so to limit the opportunity for crime to take place. And then, of course, ADA standards, it's the law. And, throughout the country, everybody is doing updates to the ADA accessibility issues associated with parks. So let me get back to the pocket parks. These are really small kind of urban spaces. They typically are a small social gathering area. They may have a bench to them. They actually may have a small playground to them. They're typically a half an acre to an acre in size. They are not meant to have large amount of people in them, and they're certainly not meant to engage a lot of formal activity. Neighborhood school parks, length of stay is 30 minutes to an hour, maybe an hour and a half. We're all very familiar with these. Some of the amenities that you typically see within neighborhood parks, gazebos, small pavilions, maybe a loop trail, playgrounds. You typically do not see athletic fields in them. You have limited parking. They're typically meant to be walked to by the neighborhood that they are serving. Typical size, half an acre to an acre, up to 10 acres.
I have a question on
Yes.
one of the amenities. Are you seeing a shift in the wanting to have restrooms in the neighborhood parks?
It's common just simply because a lot of the amenities are associated with kids and younger kids. But they're expensive, number one, and number two, you have to be very specific as to why you would do that. If you have a pavilion in which you're encouraging, or a shelter in which you're encouraging people to do picnics there, then you would typically have a restroom. If you don't have those shelters or pavilions there, and it's just kind of a playground kind of park, you typically would not. But they are becoming more and more common in neighborhood parks because of the type of amenities, and the length of experience is starting to get a little bit longer with neighborhood parks.
Thank you.
Sure. As far as community parks go, I like to reference these as neighborhood parks on steroids. They have a lot of the same features that a neighborhood park would have, but you start to add in athletic fields. You absolutely will have restrooms in these. You will have much more parking. The length of experience is, 2 to 3 hours, maybe sometimes up to 4 hours. And a lot of these parks have athletic fields in them, and so that is where you typically would see your ball games being played, whether it's soccer or football or baseball, and so on and so forth. Regional parks, larger. Probably the best way I can describe a regional park is it does not come in one shape and size. Sometimes we consider regional parks to be huge circles or squares or rectangles, but these can be linear. And they are meant to have people come and be there for a half a day to a day. You typically have what I would call different pods within your regional parks. So maybe in a regional park, you would have athletic fields, or maybe you would have tennis courts, or maybe you would have a group of picnic shelters. Typically, they have different recreation pods in which people will experience multiple things in them. They typically are also supported or designed in such a way to help support special events as well. These typically are larger in size. They can be small, but usually are upwards of 50, 75, up to 150 acres. Sports complexes are just exactly as they describe. These are not meant to be, this is not community parks. Sports complexes are really about all just athletic fields. Maybe you will have some support amenities such as a playground or a concession stand or a restroom, but typically it's just all athletic fields. And these are mostly designed in such a way that they're meant to be a regional draw, and really designed to drive sports tourism or drive economic development through sports tourism. These are usually located near freeways or highways, where you have shopping, where you have dining, where you have hotels. So if anybody can kind of picture that, it's this mecca of 12 soccer fields and 8 baseball fields all in one location, and upwards of 1,000 parking spaces, and you just have tournaments all weekend and so on and so forth. Special use parks facilities, these are unique, and it's kind of why it's termed kind of a catch-all of special use park facilities. It can be a standalone dog park, could be a standalone skate park, can be a trailhead. They can be just very unique amenities that maybe you would see in a neighborhood park, or maybe you would see in a community park, but it's a standalone park facility. Greenbelts, trails, recreation corridors, exactly as they, the name describes. These are long linear stretches typically meant to carry a trail system. So whether it's Clarksburg Ranch, Sycamore Trail, that gives you an example of typically what that type of category is. And then conservation parks and open space, again, exactly as it's described. These are large tracts of land that are not to be developed on. Maybe you would have a small trailhead and a small parking lot that people would be able to go on soft surface trails, but you typically do not develop these in any way, shape, or form. Level of service standards. So I will try to describe this very quickly before I show you a very complicated set of Excel spreadsheets that are dropped on this. It really is just a matter of measuring through the different park classifications, as well as all the amenities in the park, how much inventory, how much stuff you have for X number of people. Park acres are typically calculated in X number of park acres per 1,000 people that live in your community. The other stuff, the amenities, the ball fields and so on and so forth, is measured based on one field, one picnic shelter, one playground for X number of people. So what I want to show you is what your current inventory is, and what your current level of service looks like, and what that looks like as you start to move into what I would call a recommended level of service versus what your current service level is, and then how that translates to your community needs. So first I wanted to take a stab at parks for you. What you will see is the different park classifications that I kind of mentioned early on just a little bit ago. We do not have any sports complexes, and we also measure recreation corridors a little bit differently, and I'll explain that in a bit. But these are the different park classifications. You have city-owned inventory, and then you have other inventory that's owned, but it's publicly accessible. So that gives you a total inventory in acres based on your park classifications. That then translates to, based on your current population of just over 53,611 folks, that translates to how many park acres within each park classification category you have for every 1,000 folks. You're just shy of about 4 acres per 1,000 in total. So, moving to the green column, we have recommended service levels based on the General Plan 2035's recommendation of having 5 acres per 1,000. Now, the General Plan kind of rolled some of these park classifications together to come up with a 2 acres per 1,000 and or a 3 acres per 1,000, I think basically in 2 categories. We have kind of taken that 5 acres and spread it out over your 5 acres per 1,000. One thing I didn't mention as I walked through the park classifications for you was that pocket parks, neighborhood parks, and community parks are the backbone of kind of a suburban urban recreation system. So that is why you will typically see most of the acreage in those, the recommended acreage in those categories. As you move to the, right, you'll start to see a 2017 standard, based on how much inventory you have against the recommended service level and how much acreage you need based on today's population within each category. So it totals 66 acres needed of developed park space across those different park classifications. Then as you move to 2027, so this takes into account a growth in population up to about 59,000 folks. That's projected by 2027. You will see the needs based on your current inventory increases from 66 acres to about 98 acres. One thing below the multiple rows there that I want to point out, especially because this was a high expressed need in your community, or that people prioritized as a need, is the amount of park acreage that you have for open space and conservation areas. You have over 1,000 acres of land just set aside for open space conservation. And that comes out to almost, I think it's about 18, 19 acres for every 1,000 folks. So I think it's safe to say that the city has done a good job of planning its land use to conserve a lot of property so that it ultimately will not be developed. So then we did the same exercise with regards to amenities. So these are your athletic fields, your playgrounds, your outdoor basketball courts, your swimming pools, and so on and so forth. So what you will see, it's basically the exact same exercise We develop the recommended service levels. The general plan does not have recommended service levels for these amenities, but as part of this exercise of understanding the needs of the community, we have developed recommended service levels for you that in turn translate to whether or not you have needs that are being met or whether or not needs exist in 2017 and 2027. You can see that you have a lot of needs in athletic fields. That's, I think, the top 5 or 6 rows. We split diamond fields out into 4 different categories because unlike a rectangular field where everybody can use, it's just a matter of splitting it up into smaller fields on a larger field. Baseball fields are a little bit different. You have different pitching distances, you have different outfield fences sizes, you have different baselines, base paths and so on and so forth. So we split those up into those 4 different categories. And then we have rectangular fields, which typically take care of soccer, football, lacrosse, and rugby, all on one. One thing to point out is that you don't have a disc golf course, but there are opportunities within the system to add one, and you don't have any publicly accessible tennis courts. The only real tennis courts, you actually have to pay a fee to use through the recreation center, or you pay a fee to use as part of a program, or it's part of the high school program. You have no publicly accessible tennis courts in your community.
We used to.
Yes.
So I have a question on the aquatic center.
Sure.
It says that we meet the standard. So we have one pool for the community as it's growing, one pool facility, and it feels like it's well used.
It is.
Just wondering if you could explain the numbers there, and because one of the biggest complaints I hear is that the school district shut down the 2 pools, and then we now have, I guess technically we have 3 pools out there now.
Correct.
But it's all in one spot.
Right.
Is there anything in here that accounts for service area and the fact that some folks?
We actually did not do equity mapping for your aquatic center, just simply because we had recommended one for every 60,000 folks. And I'll show you those maps in a bit, but basically it would have covered the entire community. I think that, yes, when you start talking about, there's a difference between the infrastructure that you have and then the operations of it. And then the operating agreement and how that will in turn impact its accessibility to the public, I think is kind of where your question is going, if I'm hearing you correctly. And so this focuses purely on the infrastructure that you have. We are doing an operational assessment that will make recommendations to how do you maximize the productivity of what you have already. And recognizing, I guess tennis courts kind of fall into that same category. You just can't use them. They're not even lit, so that even if you wanted to make them somehow, some way publicly available at the time of the year or time of the day that maybe more people would want to use them, you can't. So those are some either capital improvements that we will make and or recommendations that we make around the operations of it. But typically, a level of service for pools is anywhere from 40 to 60,000, one for every 40 to 60,000 folks in your community. Does that help?
Yeah, I think my question was more towards the issue of neighborhood equity.
Yeah, the operations. I couldn't agree more. I think that there are other opportunities from an aquatics perspective where you start to talk about splash pads and giving people opportunities to play in water from a recreational perspective that can go a long way to help supplement what you would consider to be your one full aquatic center. Okay. And one thing I did want to point out, I think it's on this next slide here, is up at the top, we talk recreation corridors. So as a consultant and a recovering Parks and Recreation Director, I am not a huge believer in having a recommended service level based on population, based on miles per thousand. We don't do that with roads. Typically, trail systems are developed in such a way based on opportunity, it's a regional network, and it's connectivity. And to just say that, oh, well, we're falling short to meet a recommended service level of X number of miles to add this tangent of trail that may just start and stop doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But we have included it because it is in the general plan, and you do have about 32 acres or 32 miles, linear miles of recreation corridor, so you have a good start in terms of meeting that standard going forward, but not so much the standard as it is creating that regional connected network of a trail system. And then indoor facilities, you're doing great. You have indoor facilities at 4 different locations, and we'll show that from an equity perspective here in a bit. So the next step is to kind of talk about equity mapping. And so I'm going to show you a series of maps. We did not map everything that I just showed you, but we mapped kind of the things that were that we felt were necessary to map. You will see circles on these maps that show service area, and to your point, Commissioner, related to what is, how much access and equity of distribution of these amenities that you have in your system. You will see some circles that are small, and when you talk about park acreage, that can be a couple of things. That could be that you have really, really small park acres, and then therefore your service area is small, and/or you can have a very densely populated area so that the service area does not extend very far in terms of meeting people's needs. When we talk, you will also then potentially see large circles, which means you have a lot of acreage, or it might mean that you just don't have a lot of population in your in those specific areas. So first, you probably see this a little bit better on your screens, but you're going to see 2 colors on these first set of maps. Green is the city's inventory. Blue is the other inventory. So from a pocket park perspective, you can see where you have distribution. We have overlaid this on a city's land use map. It's not a zoning map per se, because this would look crazy if it was a zoning map. But the pink, or probably what you see in the audience, is the purple area, is areas where you typically would not develop parks because they're industrial and or commercial areas, and they don't have a lot of value to the residents. So it's all that other area, whether it's green or yellow or what may look a little gray or beige, that we're really focused on in terms of kind of creating some equity. So you can see that you have decent distribution of pocket parks. You have some a little bit north, you have some center, though the central part of West Sacramento doesn't have a ton, and you have some to the south. When we talk neighborhood parks, you actually start to have less distribution. It's really bleak looking, and you see a lot of gaps and basically not a lot of service area covered on your neighborhood park map. So if you think that's bad,
Wait,
yeah.
so I'm just having trouble reading what the circles mean.
Yes.
If you could help me.
Sure, so-
We can't read any of this.
No,
It's like
the
big
circles
green-
are your different park locations.
So there's a big green circle over where I guess that'd be the end of Evergreen. Where is that? I can't
Yeah,
read it. Is
which-
it Meadowdale Park? So why is that a huge circle for
Because
that
there's
tiny park?
not a lot of population in that area. So it's a park that's kind of in that kind of industrial area. So you don't have a lot of residents living there, so you don't have any density to your population. So that's why that would show up as large as it shows up.
So that's basically park space per people living in that neighborhood.
Exactly.
Big park, less means big circle.
Correct.
Okay.
Or the other way around when it comes to density of population. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Sorry, I can't read any of this.
Yeah.
So I want to ask a question about my specific neighborhood, which I don't see any, I don't see anything in my neighborhood, and I think there's a blue, is that the dog park? right at the Deepwater Channel where the locks are?
Sam Combs, yes.
That's Sam, so that would be Sam Combs Park?
Yes,
Okay. So that's a small circle, because there's a lot of people that live around there?
correct,
And that's considered a smaller park?
correct.
Okay.
It's considered this is the neighborhood park map.
And so, okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Sure. From a community park perspective, you have very few community parks. You actually yourselves have 4. But up north and probably central West Sacramento, there's very little in terms of community parks. It's also why you see such a deficit when it comes to athletic fields as well, because you have to have larger tracts of land in order to put athletic fields, and typically, unless you have a standalone sports complex, you're going to put your athletic fields in community parks. Regional parks, not bad coverage, but again, this is what I would consider regional parks are. They are bonuses to your parks and recreation system. The backbone, as I said, is typically pocket parks and/or neighborhood parks and/or community parks. Special use parks.
Wait, sorry, can you go back one?
Sure.
So what are we considering regional parks here? Is this the Deepwater Channel boat launch?
It is barge canal access, recreational access area, and then I am drawing a blank on
The Broderick,
Broderick boat ramp.
So Broderick Boat Ramp and.
oh, no, I'm
the-
sorry.
No, that would be a
Regional,
special
that's
use.
the Riverwalk Park.
Riverwalk.
Riverwalk.
So Riverwalk Park, that's something I think of more of a traditional park, and then the Deepwater Channel boat launch
Yep,
has been getting a lot more use lately. So those are our only 2 regional parks.
correct, right now. And then special use parks, think like Roland Hensley's on here, the trailhead, for all intents and purposes is what that is. And then you have a couple other smaller ones as well. Little League ball diamonds, this is based on, again, on your existing inventory. You can see that Memorial Park serves a lot in the center part of the community, and then Alice Norman and Bright Park up north, really nothing to the south. Girls Fast Pitch, everything is up north at Alice Norman. Teen adult baseball, actually pretty good distribution. I don't see usually this distributed the way it is. One of them is the high school ball field, which is the one thing on that campus that does get used for other than just high school athletics. But you have obviously one up at Bright, and then of course one down at Bridgeway.
Go ahead. Sorry, is the one at Bridgeway in use?
Is it in use?
Yeah, is that the one in Bridgeway in use? Just curious.
Yeah.
Nobody's using it right now.
So that's actually not a facility we have? I mean, do you mean right now because it's the
It's a
season?
facility we have. We just don't allow older age groups to use that facility or rent that facility.
And that's because there was neighborhood issues
Residents.
with baseballs?
Residents behind there.
And then the blue one, that's the high school?
Correct.
Actually, I need to make a correction. I think the West Sac Little League slide may be incorrect. It did not include Bridgeway Lakes. They do play, Little League does play at Bridgeway Lakes, but it is limited to, I don't think anyone over the age of 13
Okay.
can play because they hit the balls too far. So,
But there is some use by the younger?
yes,
Okay,
it
that's
is
actually good to
utilized
hear.
by Little League up to a certain age limit.
Okay, that makes sense.
The field is sized to carry teen adult baseball, but because of its location and residents, can't be.
I lived out there when the residents shut it down.
Yep. Adult softball, all up north. Rectangular fields, decent distribution, but not great. But I think that you will start to see this to be expanded a little bit, especially if Bright Park ever gets fully developed. And then we'll also talk about Westmore Oaks as well.
So, sorry, I keep asking questions.
No, this is why I love to do this halfway through. Imagine doing this all the way at the end, all at once.
So on baseball fields, we showed the high school with a blue circle as having some baseball fields.
Right.
But then we didn't do that for rectangle fields.
No, because as we've talked with folks, we recognize that, yes, some outside groups actually end up having access to the baseball field, but they don't have access to the rectangular fields. So we didn't include them because they weren't publicly accessible.
Okay.
Well, they used to have, at least at the high school, they used to have a little soccer club that was an outside that had used to the one rectangular field there.
We can certainly follow up, but we were basing it on the information that we had received and talking with staff and others, that really the only thing on that high school campus from an athletic field perspective that gets used now by outside groups is the baseball
Okay,
field.
about 2-3 years ago, they actually had a soccer team that was on it.
Okay, we will follow up on that. Would love to include it because that certainly would expand rectangular needs.
And under rectangle fields, that would include football, obviously.
It includes all the multi-purpose field sports, so football, lacrosse, rugby, soccer.
Do we know where any of the football, aside from high schools, currently being practiced or played?
Not really, no.
So since no River City or
Right.
Marshall or Westmore Oaks stopped allowing Pee Wee there, there's been no football fields in West Sac that have been used that we know of?
Correct.
Okay.
Reservable picnic shelters. Since this was a high need and your community does like to party outside, this obviously shows huge gaps in your system in terms of providing reservable picnic shelters. Dog parks, decent coverage. Probably one up north would, you could probably plant the flag call today on that.
Why is Sam Combs blue?
It's actually not owned by the city.
It's not, who owns it?
The port.
We know. Oh, it's the port, okay. It's interesting.
Okay, they have a little dog park that's across the street from Rayleigh's Field, and I assume that's not owned by the city either? Right there on 3rd Street?
I don't think that's a formal dog park. I'll follow up on that, but
Pretty well fenced in and everything.
yeah, I'll
But like I
check
said,
on that.
it's, well, that used to be city property. You know, I mean, you had that street that went through there, and they eliminated that. But if you look down there, it's all fenced in, and you see the dogs in there. So I'm just saying
Right.
that it's right across, right there on 3rd Street, the corner right off it, so.
Okay, I'll check
Okay.
on that.
Okay, we'll check on that. Thank you. Indoor recreation facilities, you can see, as we showed in the level of service table, you're pretty well covered from these perspectives. I will go so far as to say we are doing the Recreation Center business plan update. So though you don't necessarily need more square footage, we certainly are looking at productivity of space and how you can get more people to use what it is that you have. Skate park, just the one, pretty decent coverage. Outdoor basketball courts, not too bad of coverage with those as well. And I love to put this one up there. Nothing. There are not any tennis courts publicly accessible. So, we wanted to talk about acreage that's on the books, but that's currently undeveloped. Because as you start to get into making recommendations, you know, when you start to see that you need X number of more acres of all of these different park classifications, the assumption is you can easily make without doing any research is that you need to buy more land and develop more parks. We wanted to take a look at what are all the parks that, you know, basically are undeveloped but planned in West Sac in the future. With the full recognition, and a lot of these are either economic development drivers and/or potential development, residential development. So you see a grand total of 472 acres. So if all of these parks were to have been developed by 2027, you will see that your acreage needs in 2027, based on your current inventory, is about 98 acres. If you developed all those parks by 2027, it would be only 8 acres needed. The moral of the story is that there's not a lot of land, raw land that's not planned, that needs to be purchased and planned for and developed and set aside for parks. It's about developing what's kind of on the books that is currently undeveloped. It's a really important key component. So when we start to look at if you develop these parks, how does that start to fill in on the equity mapping? So you will start to see a series of maps just based on pocket parks, because we don't want to make assumptions based on the amenities that would go into these parks. But just based on park acreage, you will see the blue circles, the green circles, but you also see red circles. Those red circles are those undeveloped future parks. You start to see how the gaps start to become filled with those red circles. Neighborhood parks, same way. Now you start to see a lot more development of neighborhood parks in Central and West Sac. You still have gaps up north, but you also have a lot more community parks up north as well. You see how those gaps start to get filled in.
What is the red one in the center? It's either State Streets or Westmore Oaks neighborhood. Can you tell me what that park is?
Can you squeeze in? I cannot.
I keep wanting to do that on the screen. I can't read anything on it.
Yes, that actually is the charter school site that we're going to talk about a little bit later in the presentation. So you can see if that wasn't included as part of the inventory, there would be a gap there.
Yes.
But we wanted to include that just for this mapping purpose, so that you could see that there is a need there that could potentially be filled. But we'll speak to that in a little bit, or Michael will.
And community parks, the big circle in the middle, again, that's the Westmore Oaks school property. But again, you start to see how if you develop the parks, it not only takes care of it numerically, but it also starts to take care of it based on an equity perspective as well. Regional parks, a lot of this is tied to the economic development component. It's also potentially tied to the development of other things along Riverwalk, Stonelock, Barge Canal, and so on and so forth. And then special use parks, just the one that would typically get developed there. Okay, so that kind of tells you a story based on the inventory that you have against the recommended service levels, the needs that you have. The one thing that I wanted to take a moment before I dive into site-specific conceptual master plans is, number one, we'll make sure that we scrub that inventory based on some of the comments tonight, and make sure we plot it and get it as accurate as we possibly can based on where we're at on June 5th of 2018. But the other thing is that we did show needs exist within the amenities that go into parks. We did not make any preconceived notions associated with what would go into those future parks. And so what you do is when you start to develop those parks, you start to turn to the community's needs, and you start to turn to that level of service analysis, so that you start to put the amenities in where you're short, and you're not necessarily just adding amenities for the sake of duplicating them in a specific service area. So it kind of goes a long way, and it works hand in hand together. But kind of that moral of the story related to park acreage is simply that it's not about buying raw land to plan for and develop parks. It's about developing parks that are kind of on the books, that are the city's done a good job of planning for. And that can go a long way in terms of making a recommendation. So We've also done, as part of this project, we've done kind of 3 site-specific master plans, and I wanted to speak to these very specifically, and I'll refer to some of the notes that I have here. The first one I know that you saw previously, and this is really the Central Park concept. There was also a large open house last month about these. This is one of the themes that we had expressed early on, is just how do you develop parks through economic development, and how does economic development, become developed through parks? So there's kind of 3 specific areas to these, and we're really excited about this because this was done in conjunction with economic development. So this is really about the deindustrialization of the Barge Canal area, or Pioneer Bluffs, and then also kind of the navigation facilities and redoing those as part of Stonelock. So the 3 areas, and I'm not sure, yeah, this is going to show up, but you have 3 areas of this park development, and the one is the Barge Canal Parkway. It's really about walking and biking paths, a new kind of pedestrian bridge, as well as I think more or less a non-motorized marina. So that could be paddle boats, it could be kayaks, canoes, and so on and so forth. You have the Pioneer Bluffs area, or Stonelock Plaza area, and this is really reusing the locks, developing around those as kind of a really cool park-like feature. Having been out there, it's really awesome to envision how that can be kind of a real cool focal point where you would have potential restaurants or beer gardens or plazas, splash park, pedestrian bridges, kind of in that specific area. And then to the left over here, we're kind of calling this more or less the passive open areas, so to speak. And one of the things that we just wanted to make sure of is that you have a lot of residential in this area. So you really wanted to kind of have somewhat of a really nice park along the waterfront that, for the most part, buffers the residential area there. Okay. This is a rendering. Now, these buildings are just illustrative, but it starts to show how it would look if you started to really kind of redevelop Pioneer Bluffs in this specific area, and how you would have economic development. This really kind of becomes an urban park system along a waterfront. So you have the opportunity to use the park to be able to enhance what you would consider to be the economic development on, adjacent to it, and vice versa. So these, again, are very conceptual in nature, but there's been price tags put to them. But they really are what I would consider to be a park development project and an economic development project altogether. Westmore Oaks. So I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of background on this. The schools approached the city last April or so to consider the redevelopment of these as athletic fields. So it's the old high school, all that space out back gets used, but really it's unproductive space at this point. It's maybe some school sports that take place and or recess, but it's really in bad, neglected shape. And it certainly isn't productive space for the schools, but it's also not productive space for the city as well. So the city included, as part of this project, elements to develop site-specific master plans. And so we have what I would consider to be a lot of different agreements with the schools. There's a strong partnership there, so why not consider this as another opportunity to develop park space that can be jointly used by the schools as well as then the community. This was also then kind of taken to This was taken to a 2x2 meeting on May 14th, I believe, is my date. And it will also be taken to the school board on June 14th, so about a week or so from now. Long story short is that, before Memorial Park kind of ended up where it was at, we were moving in the direction of redeveloping athletic fields on this site as had existed previously to kind of try and help meet some of the amenity needs, but also the gap needs. This rendition here, you can see that there is a Sycamore Trail landing here, additional parking here, athletic fields, rectangular fields. We potentially could synthetic turf these, we could light these. These would be in a great location for lit fields with the freeway here and the business corridor here. We would keep some basketball courts. This is a restroom, concession facility, and then 2 baseball fields at this point. This remains the bus yard and the solar panels and so on and so forth. One of the challenges with this, though, is that right now, the schools have requested that we keep kind of the modular buildings in this area. An ideal situation would have been to have those modular buildings removed and put parking there so that you had parking that could serve the rectangular fields, but then parking that would also serve the diamond fields as well. One thing that we did consider is if the bus yard got relocated, the solar panels got relocated, over parking, ideally, that we would be able to add a couple of ball diamonds there as well. There would then, we would have the opportunity, sorry, this pointer's not working very well. We would have the opportunity, which is off the screen here, to add parking as a joint use parking agreement in this area here. With regards to the businesses that are in that location.
So that's where I wanted to get on this. Is that area that you're pointing to there, would that be coming in from the backside from Sebrian Street?
Correct.
Okay, so these buses have been there for a long time. They drive down my street every day. I love seeing the buses go by, but they probably need to be located closer to a larger road that they can access where they need to go much easier and aren't going through neighborhood streets. So I think that's a great idea. And the city exploring, looking at coming in from the backside on Sebrian, I think that is a great idea.
Yeah.
That could lessen a lot of the impacts of
Traffic through the
traffic
neighborhood.
through there, and it just makes sense.
Right.
To bring, if you're going to increase the use of those fields, because they haven't been used at all recently, so this would be an increase over where the high school was at one point. I think bringing in the backside of Sebrian, there's some unused buildings there. There's a lot of underutilized properties there that the city could probably talk to them. Were you raising your finger? Do you have info
Well,
there?
I just want to, I need to make one statement so that everybody really understands that these are conceptual plans. And they are contingent, fully contingent upon the redesign of the school. The school district has not made a decision what they're going to do with this site specifically, whether they're going to raise it, whether they're going to rehab it. And so these are conceptual plans, just to give people an idea of what could occur there if we are able to have a partnership with the district, which will be completely contingent upon the redesign of the school site. So I don't want there to be any misunderstanding that we're going to go build this and this, So we are working very closely with the school district. The school district requested that we do this so that we could conceive of a partnership depending on what they do at the school site. This would be a dual-use facility that could be utilized by not only the district and the students, but the community as well, like we have done at many other facilities, Bright Park, Elkhorn Park, et cetera, et cetera. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that this is purely conceptual. We did this on behalf of the school district asking us to do this, and so, but we also have a need. This is one of those wonderful things like we've done in the past. So I just wanted to make that statement.
So understood, so you're going to work with the school district. It's going to the school district for approval. You're
I
been
think
working with the staff.
I think it's more of a workshop, not necessarily an approval. It's more or less an informational workshop in which they're going to see this kind of information for the first time. I think ultimately, and having actually been involved in a couple of these in previous lives, you have an opportunity to potentially redevelop this site smartly
Yes.
and do it all at once.
Yes.
And save money doing it. If you did this versus, and the schools came back 5 years later and said, we want to do this, well, it just doesn't work.
So, I mean, I want to say I understand what you said, and I know why you say that we got to be clear about this. But as we're going through this planning process, we're at the workshop period right now. Well, this is our second time talking about this. The community's being engaged on this. And this is the point where me, as a resident of this neighborhood, can say, here's what I'd love for the city to consider as they're talking to the school district to make this happen. And I just think, as somebody who's spent a lot of time in these fields, I've always wondered why they never figured out how to do something on the backside.
Yeah.
Something at grade over the railroad tracks, or getting rid of that warehouse that's there. And I can remember before there was anything built in those fields behind the Deerwood houses. I used to hang out in there as a little kid. So it's a very underutilized area. And as somebody now who lives in the neighborhood, who used to have two parks, kind of, because they were school district parks,
Yeah.
no longer has them. And I know we have folks in the neighborhood there too that back up to what I still call Westmore Oak. Sorry, that's where I went to school, which I think we now call the charter school site.
Correct.
But, so I mean, I think as we're going through this process, and this is the point in time where we, as citizens, should be throwing out there crazy ideas and stuff we want to see.
Yeah,
And-
these are, probably the best way to say it is they're exploratory.
Yeah.
They're conceptual and they're exploratory about what is possible on the site, but they are not in any way, shape, or form to be considered to be stamped, fully approved, site-specific master plans, because there's a public engagement component, there's a traffic component, there's an environmental impact component. This is just to be reflective of what is possible at a very exploratory level. And I know it seems like it's more than exploratory because you're seeing those pictures, but yet at the same time, it's a matter of what would fit on the land. Is it that all of this would end up there? Don't know. But it's what would fit on the property right now. Okay.
Thank you.
So the question I have, so you're just trying to show something that this is what you could put there?
Correct.
So the question I have on these, it looks like you got 4 baseball fields back to back. The 2 that are going towards the bus yard, how long are those basically? Do you know?
How long? They're 350 feet.
Okay, because it seems like we have one ball diamond that got tore down because, or it didn't get tore down, I'm sorry. It's non-used because we have problems with neighbors. We're going to have problems over there with, if the bus yard stays there, of these fields being there.
Only if you got loaded bats and or cork
Well,
baseball.
but what I'm looking at, and it seems like something on this, maybe you could centralize it more and then put some, like a soccer field or whatever you want to call that one rectangle field on the outside. A suggestion because of the way you got, it seems like
It's orientation.
we keep doing things and then we have to rework them because maybe they're not, the neighbors are having problems with them. You know, in this case here, I don't know if the bus yard will still be there. by the time
This
it's
would
done, or what.
contemplate the bus yard being gone.
Okay, but you still got the solar there, don't you?
No, the solar would be relocated as well. So just to show you, go to back up, this is what it looks like with the solar panels and the bus yard. So you can see that the outfield fences are faced the other way. This would be based on the bus yard being relocated, the solar panels being gone. And so unfortunately, what's cut off is you basically see industrial buildings here as well.
Michael, Can I make a comment on this? So if you can go back to the other rendering, I mean, this is more of the conceptual plan we've been working with. We did explore what would happen in the event there could be a relocation of the bus yard and the solar panels, but we've had several meetings with the school district and even the school principals, although it will be going to the school board for the first time. We've been meeting regularly with school district staff, and this is more of the direction and the focus that we've been meeting and discussing on, but we did want to, just for exploratory purpose, see, if there was a potential to relocate those other components, what else could we fit on the site? But it's, we've really been focusing more on this option, which the bus yard and the solar panel area remains.
Now, does that include coming in from the backside?
That's still really premature. I mean, it's something that we thought would be worth exploring, but we really haven't, pursued that
I
at
think
this point.
that's.
Stick a pin in it. I think that's one to look into.
Yep.
Yeah,
I
because
would
the only
agree.
thing they're using for right now is soccer fields.
I'm sorry?
The only thing I see them using for it right now would be soccer fields.
Right, exactly. And that, if you saw an aerial, you went on Google Earth, you could see what soccer field was actually used, because you could see the green grass.
Yeah. Well, they actually have tennis courts over there too.
Yes. Okay. So the charter school site, or Old Westmore Oaks, this contemplates some redevelopment as a neighborhood park. It's about 4.6 acres. You would have entrances here. You'd have another entrance kind of in this area here. Playground area, open field, open space, tennis courts, basketball courts, and then just some kind of more open space. This would fill in a great kind of neighborhood park need in this part of the community. And this kind of still falls into the same category as we talked about with regards to Westmore Oaks. Exploratory, what could happen, and what kind of would fit on the site. But it would make great use of land that really is, it's unproductive or underproductive in terms of serving as a potential park. Simple. I think it's very well done, in particular in terms of access. The loop trails within it are a major component. And sometimes, I think I failed to say this when we talked about trails and walking trails and biking trails, and sometimes we only think about those in terms of these long linear connections and recreation corridors. But this kind of concept of having loop trails within neighborhood parks or community parks where people can just actually walk to it and walk has as much value from a recreation perspective, purely from meeting a very basic, I want to get out and walk a few steps every day, or I want to walk a mile, I want to walk 2 miles, and do it in a pleasantly pleasing area in which you're not necessarily just walking up and down streets where people are wondering what you're doing and why you're doing it.
So,
Question on this one here.
Yes.
Where's your opening of that school right now? The front of the school?
Oh, it's right here. This is their parking lot area.
what's the arrow?
Yeah.
What is
Okay,
This is
it's
the
right
back
there?
of the school.
Okay.
What is the arrow?
Oh, that's just showing another access point to it, to the park. So you could see
Okay.
this.
And so number 9's actually the tennis and basketball courts?
Correct.
Okay. Because at one time.
I think that's the,
Because
this
at
is
one
the
time,
tennis
over there
courts here.
basically
This
were
is
like
basketball.
6 is at, 6 or 11, they actually were, the basketball courts are over there, and you had the neighbors with them, their backyard backing up to that.
Correct.
We got
so-
one here.
So they weren't too happy with that.
And that's, again, exploratory. This potentially could be relocated to here, so that you
Well,
don't
no, I'm
have.
just saying 9's like actually in, away from the area where it could be a problem.
Right. These maybe can cause a problem here.
Yeah, well, actually, they were out over, not 6 or 11, used to have some basketball courts out there that the kids used to play in, and the neighbors weren't too happy with that.
Right.
On the walking trails, I mean, those are important to me. I lost 70 pounds walking around the field at River City.
That's awesome.
About 6 years ago. And it wasn't the prettiest field to walk around, but I was walking around my kids' football practice, which they can't do there anymore. But I'll tell you, it was treacherous. There's a lot of gopher holes in that field. And walking, I'd just walk an hour and 10 minutes a day while he was doing practice. And just to have some sort of granite trail or just something simple to be able to walk around would be really nice. Right now in the neighborhood, it's a nice neighborhood to walk around, but when you want to put on your sweats and put on your earphones and go do something like that, like you said, walking around the neighborhood is, there's not an option right now in the neighborhood to do something like that, and
Right.
this would be nice. The rail yard's nice, but not a lot of people want to go walk in amongst propane tankers.
Yeah, no. And just, everybody knows Westmore Oaks is up here, where it says charter school, just in terms of orientation. So it's relatively close. So it'd be major park improvements in an area of the community that has significant need. Okay?
Because there's 0 parks in that neighborhood right now, right?
Correct.
Okay.
A question. So this is a neighborhood park,
This would be a neighborhood park. It's
And
about 4.6 acres.
and typically those have bathrooms, correct? And so would this have a bathroom?
We're not proposing bathrooms here because we're not really putting any picnic shelters in which people are going to be there for much more than an hour. It is possible that you could. We obviously did not, just simply because we kept the amenities to it limited so that people would be there half an hour to an hour maybe. But it is possible. We would just have to identify utility locations and where that would possibly go.
Oh, when you say identified utility locations, like as far as when we say equity, for instance, this is, I'm still fairly new to West Sacramento, so correct me if I'm wrong, like in that neighborhood, you're saying like if a bathroom exists in a neighboring park, you wouldn't put one there? You know what I mean? Like,
No, I think it's very more park specific because I've never operated a park system in which we relied on a bathroom in another park to service a specific park. So if, for example, we were to put in a splash pad in this park, and you would put in a picnic shelter, well, that would almost trigger the necessity for a restroom. But here, it's a simple playground, an athletic field. If something were to go on in that park for a special event or something along those lines, you could bring in portables. But, for the most part, we're not adding amenities here that typically would end up, being, having people there for a couple hours.
okay, so, and the previous slide discussing the current Westmore Oaks, I'm sorry, this one, this would have bathrooms?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
That's what I
The
meant,
bathrooms, whether it's on this one, we'll just show it on the restroom facility here, and then a smaller restroom facility here. So yes.
Okay, thank you.
And for this park here, I mean, I would advocate keep it simple.
Yeah.
There's no need for a bathroom in a smaller neighborhood park. And, I mean, even if this park just had the gate unlocked, a play structure put in, and the sprinklers turned on for a little bit, so there's some green grass there and an area for kids to play. I mean, I think that would go a long way to service that neighborhood.
An interim phase, yes.
Yeah, and I mean, I think bathrooms for this type of park are expensive, and they probably aren't needed in this park and might, cause issues with the neighborhood having bathrooms at this one.
Yeah, understood. Okay. Any other questions, comments, suggestions?
I just have one more thing about the bathroom. I think the reason I bring it up is because like I live like close to here, and so what I always think of is when I mentioned like using a bathroom at a different park, because the three parks that exist near my neighborhood don't have bathrooms. So I'm sure that you'll look at that in terms of like equity and what's accessible
Right.
and whatnot. And so I was just kind of worried because a lot of times we go to parks for for soccer practice or whatever, and my kids are like potty training, there's nothing nearby. We've had to use a dog park actually to let them go
Yeah.
potty because there's nothing that exists.
Well,
so.
and again, that goes back to an operational component sometimes, and, kind of one flip side to the equation is having that open space might encourage soccer practices. And not that it would be formal, not that somebody would come to us for a reservation, but they may just say, hey, you know what, we got a parking lot, we kind of live in this neighborhood, let's go use that. By putting a restroom in, you're actually going to encourage that a lot more, and you would end up with folks from outside the neighborhood trying to cannibalize that space. Whereas if you keep it simple, you limit that issue actually occurring. People understand, or at least you should understand, that, you typically don't want to have a soccer practice that's going to last an hour and a half or 2 hours in a location that you don't have restrooms. But to your point, it underscores the fact that you don't have that you have athletic field needs. And when you have athletic fields, you want to have those athletic fields in the parks that have the support facilities that are necessary in order for you to run those activities. So parking, lighting, restrooms. And right now, everybody's just trying to find every last little piece they can just to do what they want to do. And the city's inventory just doesn't support it at this point.
They actually, the old West Mohawk School, that and Evergreen, they actually had plans to rework them, but that's been 20 years ago.
Yeah. All right, so our next steps, busy summer. Working on the Recreation Center business plan, the operational and staffing assessment. So I may or may not have shown this to you, but we are working this master plan under the guise of total cost of ownership. So if you build something, you better make sure that you have the dollars and cents necessary in order to manage it and operate it and maintain it to the level that it's expected. And then we also know that nothing lasts forever. So there's always life cycle replacement. So we are going to be very mindful of staffing capacity, operational dollars when we start making recommendations related to capital improvements, just simply because you can't expand your park system and expect your maintenance staff to be able to continue to maintain everything at a specific level. It's kind of like that old theory, if you stretch a rubber band so far, at some point it's eventually going to break. And you will just end up spending too much resources and spreading everything too thin. So that's going to be a major component. We are working on a capital improvement plan. We will do an impact fee update as part of this Nexus fee, as well as this, and then of course funding strategies. So kind of those last 4 bullet points are all intertwined. And so at this point, I'll just field any questions that you may have, if you have any left. I actually appreciate the interaction as we go through, as opposed to trying to answer them all and flip back through slides.
Anyone else have any questions? Last minute?
So my last, well, I don't know if it's my last, but you talked earlier about the CPTED?
CPTED, yes.
CPTED. How does that process work, and specifically on these last 2 parks? What does that process look like to
There are a
figure that out?
there are a set of standards and guidelines that you use that landscape architects use to develop what I would consider to be these are very high-level conceptual master plans. So when you start getting into schematic design and you start getting into design development, you start to employ things such as CPTED is really around lighting, it's really around view shed, it's really around making sure that you traffic, so that you have good traffic in and out, ingress, egress, you have enough parking. Basically, anything that you think of from a customer service perspective in which you're encouraging a bunch of people in a mass public participation area, whether it's formal or informal, you want to make sure that you have opportunities where the park polices itself. And a component of that is those SEPTED standards. So think lighting, think view shed, sometimes people are like, oh, we don't want lighting in a park at night because that encourages it to be used after hours. That's not necessarily true. Low-level lighting actually goes a long way to preventing things happening within a park after hours. Or if it's completely dark, nobody can see into it. But if you have enough low-level lighting that somebody can be seen, and you have the view shed to be able to see into the park, it actually can discourage parks being used for the wrong reasons. Making sure that you don't have opportunities for homeless encampments. Those go a long way, and so there's a whole list of standards and guidelines that will be worked into the master plan as recommendations.
Sorry, I keep calling it the Westmore Oak site, but.
No, charter school
The charter
site. I got it.
school, the Westmore Oak site. There's a bunch of heritage oaks in the back of that. Beautiful trees. Does this plan incorporate those trees in a manner that they're
Kept.
protected but used? I know there's been some issues recently of, folks concerned about the Heritage Oak Park out in Southport, but, these are beautiful. This is another beautiful strand of heritage oaks we have, and would love to see, them be accessible somehow, just, walking through them or.
Yeah, I would say I don't have the aerial in terms of what it looks like now, but again, that is one of those things that when you start getting into more schematic design and you start looking at it at a more granular level as opposed to a conceptual level, that we'll start to take into consideration. I have never developed or redeveloped a park as a park and recreation director in which you're actually moving forward, not just at a conceptual level, but moving forward without engaging the public. And so if the school district were to green light, for example, this one, there needs to be a much more broad-based, community-engaged, site-specific master plan developed. And if it's coming up here, that issue is going to come up there. And typically what that would do, this is just, again, based on experience, it would trigger kind of a tree inventory in that park, and not just to determine the tree, but the condition of the tree, to determine which one should be saved and which one should go. That's part of it, and then it contemplates tree replanting. It contemplates the location of amenities associated with those trees, simply because typically your root system extends to the drip line of your tree. So the farthest extensions of your branches is where the root system goes. If you build and you start to cut into that root system, may be a healthy tree, but in 5 years, it may not. So those are kind of the things that start to be considered and contemplated when you get into a much more granular level associated with site-specific.
Next steps is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I think that's all.
I got a couple questions. So the other thing I was looking at is, I wasn't here the last meeting, but, so you also have like the Holy Cross fields. There's a section behind Holy Cross that, all of the land there that maybe the city might look at, maybe working some kind of agreement with them, or the other would be like San Pedro Park, or maybe you might, take care of the facility for so many uses during the year or something. There are pieces of property that they're in the neighborhood. We need maybe some medium, what I consider type parks that you could probably utilize out that.
Okay.
So those are two that I've noticed near the area where I live at that you could probably maybe utilize.
Potential joint use
Yeah,
agreements.
because you had that one area there that would have been a nice area maybe to put a park in, but now they've got a charter school going up in there. I think the Lighthouse one or whatever, and that one there's actually looking pretty good. So I don't know if they're going to try to maybe utilize, work with Holy Cross, maybe utilize some of that land for recreation for their kids. I don't know.
Okay.
But it's in that area. The other question I have, and because I know they've finished Phase 2 of Bright Park, So now that you got the basketball court moved down to the other side of the park, I'm not sure exactly what they're going to do with the old section of the park there, where they do have a restroom, they do have still the basketball court and a picnic area there. But I do notice we did put pickleball courts in the new basketball area there. But you might be able to, if they take away the basketball courts at the other section, I don't know if they are or aren't, you still have some cement area in there, or back of Club West, where they used to have a tennis court.
Right.
Back in that area. Those are two things that you might look at before, at least the one in Bright Park, before you maybe think about removing it quickly before, that you might be able to utilize it still.
Okay.
Because the cement in both those areas is not that bad a shape.
Okay.
Okay?
Sounds great.
And I noticed in Bright Park, they're still utilizing both the new picnic area and the old one still, quite a bit.
Right.
So that was my comments.
Yep, and that goes to the fact that you have a lack of pavilions and shelters. That's why they get used the way they get used.
The other quick question I had was, I know at one time we were looking at small parks. For example, we have a lot there in Arlington Oaks that all it has is a bench there.
We just went by that today.
And
I don't even know if we want to call that a park, but.
Well, it's there, and but maybe it's something where maybe the city could look at maybe eliminating, actually trying to sell it off or something. But I mean, at least the one over on, I think it used to be called Patton, which was over near the Largemont Living. At least that one there went to the levee, and you had somebody who was taking care of it, pretty much so. But some of those, something like that one there, that one little piece of property, it's more of an eyesore than anything else, so.
We literally were just there at 3 o'clock, 2:30 this afternoon, looking at that exact site, and I agree with you. It really looks like a very small, neglected, vacant lot.
Yep.
And the city, at the very least, probably just needs to get it cleaned up so that it doesn't get used for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, but it'd be nice to get it cleaned and keep it clean.
Yes.
Because I've seen it get cleaned up, but then 4 months later, it's not again, so.
Yep.
And it's probably more of a pain than what it's worth sometimes.
Yep. Tracy's timing is impeccable. She anticipated that coming up this evening.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's it for the questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, folks.
At this time, we're going to go ahead and move back up to the agenda. We have a couple of people that would like to provide public comment. I'll ask Betty Fredrickson to come up, Sheila Johnston, Pat Flint, and Danny Langford to the podium. And just as a friendly reminder, each person is limited to 3 minutes. Oh, one at a time? Sorry, Betty Fredrickson.
I hadn't planned on speaking tonight, but since I'm here and all these areas have been covered, I've lived in Westmore Oaks for 46 years, and my house is the house on the corner that backs up to the Heritage Oaks and the schoolyard, that the grass is this high and they've been going to put sprinklers in for 40 years, and it's a fire hazard. But our neighbors are all old in that area, and the school is locked up now because we've had homeless in there behind those houses and in the corners. And we're concerned about if that's open all night, what's going to happen. And we're all old, and if you're going to put walking trails, you better make them big enough for wheelchairs, because there's a lot of us that use walkers and wheelchairs. And this is the first we had heard of this. And I would think the neighbors should have been notified somewhat of what's going on. So I hope you'll take us into consideration and notify us as to what's going on. The charter school over there, as far as I'm concerned, is a waste. They've got it all pinned off, and there might be 50 kids going there. And the rest of the yard is used for nothing. So we hope you give this consideration of the neighborhood, and we're a close-knit neighborhood. Most of us have been there a long time, and we can be hardy, so look out for us too.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patty.
Sheila Johnston?
Good evening. My name is Sheila Johnston, and I'm here today to express my concerns about the path this commission is taking regarding the charter school site and the master plan in general. My basic question is, who's going to pay for this? I'm not sure you can answer that question, or if anyone can answer this question. A bigger concern I have is that this is one more example where the city disregards taxpayers and homeowners. As you just heard, nobody in the neighborhood was even confronted with this issue. This is the first time people are hearing about it. Well, it's pretty concerning. Additionally, have you ever visited a park on a Sunday morning? Do you see all the trash that's there after visitors to the park throw water balloons and have alcohol bottles? I run every morning and walk with my dog. It's a nightmare to try to walk through a park on a Sunday morning. This city cannot keep up with the demands to keep our parks clean. Why would you go ahead and put more parks in neighborhoods where there are taxpayers that try to keep their neighborhoods clean? This city is not prepared to take on more responsibilities, especially with the funding streams that are kind of dwindling. Just 2 weeks ago, the City Council illustrated that their goal is to bully homeowners, and tonight, you're also illustrating the same process. It's time for this chaos to be stopped. The city cannot afford taking on more debt, creating more parks. Stick with what you have, maintain what we have, and make sure that the residents of the community that put their good faith in creating the city are respected, and that those that continue to work hard for the city make sure that their dollars are not wasted for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Pat Flint?
Thank you. Commissioners, you're all new faces except for Danny. Matt, I've met a couple times. I haven't met you guys. One thing that the consultant brought up is crime prevention has good eyes on the parks and the trails. Both of these schools are pretty isolated. You can only look in the playgrounds if you, especially at the James Marshall, Westmore Oaks, whatever you want to call that school. You can only get back there by driving back there. The police can't enforce it back there, although the city did say they would probably use their ATVs or some other mode of transportation. It's not safe for kids. The pathway, public pathway across those grounds is not safe for kids. You have to understand, as an ex-school board member, and to this day, I blame myself for letting the city put parks on school grounds. But I was one that approved it at the time. Times have changed. It's more dangerous out there for kids. We have to protect them the best we can. Those fields are used out there. I was out there at my grandson's soccer game the other day. Intramural sports are being used on those school grounds. Now, for the little Westmore Oaks sweet neighborhood school that I went to 60-some-odd years ago, it's the management of the school district to keep up those grounds. They should be watered. They should be cut. It's not up to the city. You're going to put a park back there that has, I can't even, probably 75 neighborhoods, backyards back up into that park. You're going to have tennis balls being bounced back and forth when people are out there having a barbecue. It's not going to work in that neighborhood. And I can tell you that the schools have more than enough children to make that another elementary school. They're really overcrowded as a K-8 program at the other elementary sites, and they're going to need to take that school back. And again, I just don't think this is a good idea. I think there are other places, like Danny mentioned, that some of these parks can go, and I have no understanding why we would not consider a sports complex or some kind of complex where we can put all of the things that other cities everywhere in our region have. We deserve it too. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. And Danny Langford?
Good evening. A couple of comments I found interesting. One is the consultant was saying that the public hasn't been engaged enough, and I agree on that. Obviously, the neighbors are here. My husband grew up in that community, or in that neighborhood in Westmore Oaks. So Westmore Oaks Old is very dear to my heart. He went there, his sisters went there, my 3 children went there. He used to jump the fence when you hear the bell. It backs up. So impacting that community is going to be detrimental if we don't do it right. And it's really concerning because I've been very engaged in the last several months in city and school district meetings and getting my knowledge firsthand and doing my research. The school board has never given the superintendent direction to enter into conversations with the city, nor have they approved it, nor have they seen any of this. They don't even have a plan. I went to their study session on what they're going to try to do. They might float a $100 million bond, they might do this, they might do that. They have no direction. So to go to the impact of designing these and putting these fields as a concept is very concerning when the school district doesn't have a plan as what they're going to do with either one of those sites. We did have tennis courts. The Northwest Interceptor messed our tennis courts up at the old River City, current Westmore Oaks, and old Golden State, current Riverbank. Both the pools and the tennis courts were messed up in that. The rec center uses the tennis courts all the time when the high school isn't using them because we have a very active high school tennis team. There's so many things that came up when you guys were talking. I do appreciate Mr. Hargrove's comments about the entrance for the Sycamore Trail concept and all of that at the Seabrian side. Definitely needs to be there. It should not be, with the safety that we have in the United States with school shootings, that trail should not go behind that school directly, nor should it impact that neighborhood as it's going to. And as much as we want to think that there's not going to be blight, that lady that said about the trash on Sunday mornings, go to Joey Lip's park and look at all the trash. Watch the things that go on there, because I've sat there and watched it, and it's a little alarming that we're going to have that behind a school. And who's going to remove the toxic waste if we move MOT, the bus yard? Who's going to pay for that? Because the school district doesn't have money. The city, the mayor at the 2x2 and at the city council meeting says, we don't have money in our parks and recs money. Where are they going to put that? Who's going to pay for the property for that? Who's going to pay to move the solar panels? And where are they going to put that? Because that's not in any of the concepts. And why wasn't the Seabrian even a concept brought to you guys? I don't understand that. I know that staff has worked really hard on that, but I don't understand. I think it's still got a lot to go. One more thing, I know my 3 minutes is up. Please do not let anything happen to any of the Oaks at the current Westmore Oaks. We cannot put parking lot where that Oak Grove is, nor can we mess with the Oak Grove at the current the charter school, the old Westmore Oaks. That's such a lovely neighborhood. We need to preserve it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all of you who provided public comment. It's really important to hear all of your perspective as well and to sit through this whole presentation. It's very much appreciated. Moving back to on the agenda where we were at, we're going to go ahead and do the director's report. Oh, sorry.
So is there a chance to address some of those public comment in the director's report? Yeah. I think these are, this is why we're doing this, is a workshop. I think it's, I would love to hear about some of this and just know where the city's heading and where you're thinking, and we got neighbors here and would love to just chat about some of the stuff. Because I lived in the neighborhood too. I grew up on Longcroft. So I feel very strongly about the neighborhood also. My vision is to open these fields back up. So what I did when I was a kid, I still have 2 kids at home. I would love to get them out into the parks. I do understand I know right where Betty lives, and And it sounds like, Betty has some concerns. Setting aside some of the school district stuff for the moment, I think that there's a great positive conversation that could be had here. And, I think there's a lot of things we could do to both of those sites to ameliorate some of the concerns of the neighbors. And I think some folks just think that a concrete path is going to be put in and all of a sudden there's going to be a zillion homeless people there. I think there's things we can do about that. I know 3 doors down from Betty a couple weeks ago, there was somebody showed up in the middle of the night in somebody's garage. And we want to, figure out ways that we can move forward with parks in an old neighborhood with folks that have lived there for 40, 50, 60 years, but also start to open up some of it. Because it wasn't that long ago that those fields were wide open. And every one of us that lived there knows 5 years ago, any one of those fields could be used for dog walking or any of that type of stuff. And then they got shut down, tighter than a drum. And I know there's probably some intramural usage there and stuff, but me as somebody who lives in that neighborhood, I can't access any of them. I walk my dogs next to propane tanks in a rail yard. So I have a real interest in seeing this happen. And to some of what the neighbor said, I think there's ways that parks can be done. I asked the question specifically on the septed, because I also have concerns about how deep that Westmore Oaks Park is. And maybe you don't use the entire area for park. Maybe you put a fence at one area. Maybe you put a fence down from Betty's house so people aren't right in her backyard. And that was what I said earlier, maybe it is closer to the pod concept, or what is it, the pocket park concept or something. So I just love, since folks are here, if we can just have the conversation and hear where the city is on this.
Well, I think the city's perspective is that we're at the beginning of this discussion, and that you have to start somewhere. And just having a blank canvas on a wall and having everybody throw paint at it, just historically, we know that hasn't worked. But we do know what works, particularly like with Bright Park. We have a master plan there that started with a concept, which is where we're at now, and over, I think it was 2 years, Danny, weren't you involved in that? They developed, or 5, I guess it was 5 years to
at least
develop
5.
the final master plan, and everybody got to give their input, the neighbors, the sports federations. We had a huge process that actually designed that park, but it started as a concept, and that's where we're at tonight. This is a concept. It's to do exactly what's happening here tonight, which is to begin the conversation, to start taking information, so that as we work with the school district, as they develop their plans, that we can go down that road together, so that we can help each other, so that we can design facilities that are multi-use, that benefit not only our school children while they're at school, but the parents can meet their school children in the yard after school and play for a little while, maybe before they go home. Or those elderly residents, even if they are in wheelchairs, can push that father, that mother, that brother, that sister in that wheelchair in the early evening around that play yard as well. As you know, our parks are closed from sunset to sunrise. They're open from sunrise to sunset. So we would need to address those septet issues, and we're getting smarter, and we're gaining more information, and we're using examples from across the nation of what works and what doesn't work, and all of that would be incorporated. So actually, to have a dialogue, I think it's almost too early. I mean, we're at the conceptual stage, and I'm appreciating these questions coming in, and people need to give us more questions. How are we going to pay for it? We don't know yet. Like we've paid for everything else. We've cobbled some money here. We get a big grant over there. We have a settlement over there. Rayleigh's gives us money, or whatever the case may be. We've gotten very creative about being able to cobble funding sources together, like Bright Park. It was CDBG and grant funding and Measure K and this over here and that over there. So we'll do it just like we do everything else around here. So I don't know if that answers your question, Commissioner Hargrove, but it's too early for me to tell that we're going to put a ballpark here and this over there. It may not work out. The school district could come to us and say, you know what, at this particular site, it's just not going to work for us because we need to build a bigger school. It could be that, as I think Pat Flint mentioned, hey, they need a K-8. I don't know that they do or they don't. But if they do, they could come to us and say, hey, look, we can't do it. We're sorry because we need a bigger school facility, but we have to start the discussion somewhere, and that's really what this is about, is to begin that dialogue, to begin that discussion, to really see if we could possibly do another joint partnership together. And again, we may not, or we may, but of course we're going to engage the community. Of course we're going to come out and talk to people about what they think would work and what they think wouldn't work, just as I'm sure the school district will do as well.
So ultimately, the school district pretty much has final say.
Yes.
Has
Yes.
any of this been taken to the city council yet?
Did we take no, it actually went to the school 2x2 first, and we birthed it. It's now here. It will be going to the school district on 14th of June. Then we are scheduled to come to city council, I think, the end of June.
So the process has been kind of parallel on both sides. So the
Yes.
staff on the city side, working through the city manager, has a existing relationship with staff on the school district side.
That's correct.
And you guys have been, so do you need board approval to talk to staff at the school district? Or do you have any ongoing agreements on?
We do have an existing MOU with the school district that vests that ability in both the superintendent and the city manager, signed by both the Washington Unified School District and the city council. It is an MOU that outlines joint use facilities specifically.
So the process has been, you guys have talked.
Correct.
And you both are in the planning stage.
Correct.
Engaging the public now. There'll be a lot more engagement of the public.
In the future, correct.
And eventually, this then goes to both the city council and the school district. School district could say, no, thank you, no how, no way.
Correct.
City council could say, we can't afford this, this isn't the right thing for us, Westmore Oaks doesn't need a park.
Correct.
So at this point, this has been working kind of the same way that some of the past joint use facilities have been working?
That is absolutely correct.
Is this ridiculously different than any of those?
No, it is not. And as a most recent example is the improvements that were done at Elkhorn Elementary School. You may recall that there was a old broken-down toy there, and we did quite a bit of improvements there, and it was just by a fluke that we got a big grant. We went to them and says, hey, do you want us to do this? School district staff said yes. We went to the board, we went to the council, boom, done.
Yeah, okay. Because I see there's, with the Westmore Oaks site, the charter school site, you know, there's a lot of parallels there with Elkhorn. Elkhorn has kind of some of the same sightline issues that were mentioned, probably some of the same concerns about homeless that Betty mentioned. And Elkhorn has been something that the city and the school district have partnered on and is kind of a nice park in that neighborhood now. I mean, I think there's some parallels with parks that you guys have already worked on, and I'm sure that you're doing some lessons learned there. Again, I have concerns about, I don't want homeless folks setting up camp in either one of those school districts. And right now, they can be because there's no 911 dialing citizens that are in those fields. That's the number one thing that parks professionals will tell you, is get Betty around there walking around at 5 o'clock at night on a nice big wide trail. Get neighbors into those parks, and that will keep them safer. So, I mean, I think that's some of the safety issues. And I know there's a lot more. Pat mentioned crime prevention. I mean, that's a huge issue, especially when we put in when the new Sycamore Bridge comes in there. That's something that's going to have to be figured out.
And we may determine that it's not feasible at the end of the day, but we need to at least have the opportunity to explore those possibilities and those potentials. I think we owe it to our children, we owe it to our community, and we owe it to ourselves to at least explore the ideas and try to answer the questions. Again, at the end of the day, it may not work, but we won't know unless we try.
There was a question, how does the park get cleaned up? I mean, that's an ongoing issue.
Yeah, we have full park superintendent and parks maintenance division that we currently utilize for both Elkhorn Park, Bright Park, just like any of our other facilities, Riverwalk Park, either whether it's city-owned, port-owned, school district-owned, we have a full maintenance crew. And then we actually have some parks that are done by contractors, like Garden Park is actually contracted.
And then Ms. Langford brought up engagement of the community. So I assume once we get past concept stage, if we get past concept, if the school district says, yeah, this is a good idea, that the city will start engaging people that live in the immediate area? And what's the past process on that, Ben?
Well, just because everybody agrees, hey, this is a good idea, it gets back to some of the questions they've raised. We would have to wait for the school district to coordinate on the actual design of these facilities based on what they're going to do with their school, which hopefully we could do collaboratively and go out to the community together. Here's what the school's looking like, here's what we're thinking about on play fields, so that it's not done in silos, so that people can see how these facilities would coordinate together. But those details still need to be worked out. From my perspective, if we're going to have a park facility or a shared use facility, absolutely, the city will go out to the community and probably actually, my preference is to hold these things at the parks. So for example, Memorial Park, we're not going to have a dog and pony show here in the Galleria. We're going to go to the park, we're going to set up boards, we're going to have people that can come, that live right next to it, come to the park to look at it and touch it and feel it and see it. Because we just think we can get better input and more people to come because they're right there. So my guess is we'll do the same thing. Let's have a picnic in the park and talk about it.
That's good, because I know a lot of folks that back up to Westmore Oaks
Absolutely.
that will
And we have to
insist on
we
that.
have notifying requirements and all of that kind of stuff.
And then other things that were brought up, Sebrian, I really, really think the city.
Absolutely took a note on that, yeah, that we should
I know
look at
that
that.
there's properties there, but I think that's key to making this, I think it's key to making the sports thing happen is having some way, whether it's an entrance over on the other side by the freeway, but some sort of back entrance.
Mhm.
I think that's just going to be key to making this work. And then, of course, figuring out safety and security issues where the park abuts up to the school, assuming the school thinks this is a good idea and wants to move forward with it. And, the bus yard cleanup, that's a discussion I hope we have. That's been a bus yard since 1949. There's a lot of gross stuff that has seeped in there. That bus yard wasn't always fenced up like it is. I used to run around through there. And I think if one thing came out of this and we got the buses out of our neighborhood, again, I don't really mind the buses, but having them drive up and down a neighborhood street every day, there's probably better locations in the city now where they could go. And cleaning that up, I think is, that's the type of thing where you can get a brownfield grant. If the school district decides that the buses don't belong there and want to relocate them, there's sources of federal dollars for environmental cleanup that the city can go after to clean that up. Again, I have concerns about biting off more than we can chew and not being able to afford it, but I also think that this is an opportunity to fix some of this stuff. And again, the neighborhood doesn't have any parks right now. I know we can go over to the Memorial Park and there's Sam Combs. But to me, again, I know I've been taking up a lot of time, it would be really nice if the city and the school district can work something out and that we can work something out with the neighbors and the community that works to even just open up a little tiny piece of the park where I can take my two dogs down there and walk them instead of hanging out by the propane tanks.
Well, that's our
Thank
intent.
you. Are there, I know this is unorthodox, are there any questions that the neighbors have that weren't addressed? I know there's bigger issues here that can't be answered tonight.
Exactly.
But I think at least while we're here, at least if we can address this is the first time that we've had folks come to a Parks Commission's meeting in a long time. So thank you for coming. And we want to make sure that there is the public engagement. And I know that sometimes it doesn't work out. You get your 3 minutes to come up, and we're not actually supposed to be doing this back and forth. But this is a workshop, and I thank all of you for coming. And for the question on the ballpark, because I was wondering that myself. Sorry, I will be quiet now. Betty?
We had a swimming pool, a football field, tennis court in the city.
Sorry, I think.
Betty, it's because this is a recorded meeting, people can't hear you. It's up to the chair whether she wants to allow you to address the commission again. It's only because people that are watching at home could not hear any of the comments in the audience because we're audio recorded. So that's why it's important that people come and speak at the lectern.
From what I heard Betty say, and I have some of the same concerns, is that we used to have a pool there. I used to hop the fence, I used to pay 50 cents to swim in that pool. There used to be tennis courts there. We didn't play tennis there, but we'd skateboard there, and there used to be the wall where we'd play handball. I spent a lot of time in the Oak Grove over there. So, I know there's been some change, and to me, the change has been negative because it's closed off areas where I think we should be able to access. And now I think the question is, how do we access those areas in a way that the neighbors, maybe that don't want to see a lot of change, but probably want to see some, and some of us, who I'm also a neighbor in that neighborhood, I'd like to see a lot of change there, to tell you the truth. I think there's a lot of potential. So I'll leave it at that. I know we're violating protocol there, and the chair has a baby up here in her lap.
Sorry.
All right. Would you like me to proceed to the director's report?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. I already spoke about Memorial Park and the Little League update. I would like to notify you about a proposal that has come to the city. You may have heard it for those of you that attended the city's State of the City about the Playa Art Trail, which is a Burning Man installation of Burning Man sculptures that would be installed along the Riverwalk in West Sacramento and also in places in Sacramento. We are working directly with the proponents of this art trail, and we hopefully will be coming back to you in the future with plans and designs and which pieces would go where and whether or not we're able to do this or not. I think they're in the midst of doing some fundraising to try to be able to do this installation. If it comes, it would be here for 1 year. Again, it would be along the Riverwalk. It would be the large art sculptures that are at Burning Man. They're super cool. It would be a real, I think, a real cool thing for us to have for a year here, this art display. I also would like to tell you about our park tour. I think you were all invited for Wednesday, June 20th. Just a reminder about our parks tour. I also wanted to let you know about...
What
time? It's at 9 a.m. here at City Hall. If you want to come, Daniel, please let Robin know, and we'll make sure and get you a seat, and we'll be providing lunch. So that's why we want to know who's coming. So that'd be great. We would love to have you because you could give us a great historical perspective. I'd also like to tell you about an art exhibit that's in Woodland currently, and you're like, why are you telling us about something in Woodland? But the only reason I'm telling you is it's at YOLO Arts Gallery 625, which is in the County Administration Building, and it's titled A Walk in the Park. And it's a exhibition celebrating local, state, and national parks, and so I thought you might find that interesting, and it's going to be again, in Woodland at the County Administration Building through July 30th. So if you get a chance, you might want to go up there. And then my final item that I wanted to tell you about is, I'm sure you've all heard about the new VIA transportation system. They have extended free rides with a passcode, and I'll hand this out to you and the community. So if you haven't tried VIA, this tells you about it and gives you an opportunity to utilize it for free.
So I just want to say my daughter has used VIA. She's 15 years old, and we're very much more comfortable with her using public transportation via VIA than calling an Uber. Actually, we would not let her just call an Uber because it's just a random driver from you don't know where. I love Uber myself, but for a 15-year-old young lady, having the option of being able to get to work using a VIA has been really great, and the feedback that I've been hearing from some other folks that have used it has been good.
Well, if you haven't used it, this is your chance to use it for free. So, and that concludes my report, unless you have any questions about specific items under the jurisdiction of the Parks and Recreation Department.
Any questions?
Just another reminder on the next steps on the Little League Park, because I know that's a big one. The dates you said on that.
Is that a future item request?
No, he's
No, I
wanting the
just- a
dates.
reminder.
Okay, I can tell you, we're meeting with this, we're getting the first conceptual designs internally on June 13th. There's this internal staff meeting. We're meeting with Little League on June 19th. And then we're meeting with, we're going to probably have an event at the park, again, to show all the concepts and get people's input on July 6th.
Perfect.
That's tentative. Those dates are tentative, but that's what we've currently have planned. If those change, we'll make sure and let you know.
Okay, thank you.
I think that one would be about 6 o'clock too,
Pardon?
on the one July 6th. I think that'll be about 6 o'clock.
I do not know the time yet, but we'll make sure and get that information to everybody in advance. We want it to still be light outside, and at 6, it would definitely be light. It gives people a chance to get home from work, so we still got to work all that out.
Okay.
But yeah. Are you suggesting that? Thank you,
No,
Commissioner
I just don't do
Clayton.
email.
We'll make sure and let you know.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for me? Great, thank you very much.
The commission calendar, the next regular meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, August 7th, 2018. And then are there any future item requests from any of the commissioners here?
Yeah, I'd like to sit there and maybe bring up Bright Park, at least the older section now, see if there's any suggestions we could bring up to what we could do with it, or if it's just going to be eliminated.
Are you speaking, Commissioner Clayton, outside of the Bright Park Master Plan, which does contemplate a complete reuse of that area? So you're thinking about what are we going to do in the interim, correct?
Right.
Got it. Okay, yeah, we'll be happy to bring that to you next time, absolutely.
And then, I don't know if this is under parks or not, but some of the transportation stuff that's been happening, I'd love to hear some more information about the jump bikes, their use, if they're being used in West Sac. I know that they're probably gathering a lot of data on that. I don't know if that falls under your purview or somebody else.
No, it's under Public Works, but I think it's important that perhaps, and we'll check with Public Works, but, you know, the council is considering the updated bicycle, pedestrian, and trails master plan. And because there's an overlap with the Parks and Open Space Master Plan, because trails and, you know, bikes and are kind of integrated, might I suggest that we have Chris Doherty come and make a presentation on the bicycle, pedestrian, and
Bike ped trail master
thank you,
plan.
master plan. And at that time, he could probably answer all your questions about jump and all those kind of things.
Well, as maybe that he's listening at home, maybe you can pass it along tomorrow on the jump bikes thing. I think there's been a misfire on that, at least at two spots, if not more, where I don't know if the city did it or if the private company that's doing the jump bikes have put in future bike rack areas, and they put them in front of homes. I know one of them got worked out on Park Boulevard. There's another one over here in Old Broderick, Washington, that looks like it's taking up somebody's parking.
Okay.
I mean, I would just, as somebody who enjoys these types of amenities, would recommend the city not shoot itself in the foot and drop these in front of folks' house unless they've talked to them and really look hard for areas. Like there's one going in, looks like at the ballpark, that was already a red parking zone. It's probably a really good place to put it. So in addition to how the bikes are being used and stuff, I would like an opportunity, because I am using them, to provide some feedback on maybe some areas where the city hadn't thought about it as they were working with this company. And then also, I am interested in the mobility scooters. I mean, I've read about that. I heard something about it at city council, and I'm just curious as to what exactly they are, who they're targeted towards, and when they're coming to town. My understanding is they're targeted for senior citizens. I mean, they're not.
I apologize, I don't know the information about that, but again, I think that we could have Chris Doherty come to you, and as part of the bicycle, pedestrian, and trails master plan, because those are all related to bike ped and trails, we could have them give you an update on that, because again, I think there is a direct correlation between the work that happens in Public Works and the work that happens in Parks and Recreation, because we do a lot of stuff together, particularly around bicycle and pedestrian facilities. So I'm more than happy to see if they can come at our next regular meeting. But in the interim, if there's direct things with Jump, if you could let me know, I'm more than happy to pass those along to Chris Doherty or Sarah Strand. I'm not quite sure who's working on it, but we'll make sure and get that information, because I really don't want to wait till the next meeting if there's something that's happening now.
Okay.
Yeah, if you just let me know, I'm more than happy to get it directed to the right person.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One other thing, I want to know if there's anything else going on with that Indian Museum on the so-called 40 acres.
The only thing that I know is that there was $100 million included in the budget at the state level that would help in funding that facility.
Yeah, I heard that too, but I was just kind of curious if, because that was set up a long time ago.
Yes,
I did
it
hear the
was.
100 million got put up there, so.
Yep.
We
So-
should know by July 15th whether or not
It passes.
it passes.
Yeah. Still subject to legislative approval, correct?
Yes.
But that was just a future item.
Right.
I'd love, so I assume that doesn't fall under your purview either, but yeah,
community
that would be
development.
also something great to hear about, because that's a really great, I think, thing that could be put in that area, which is where the old, I think there used to be an old dock there.
Marina and dock, yeah.
That actually is down from there.
And the charter house was there, wasn't it? The chart room.
No, it wasn't called the Char Room, River Galley. But it's down from that area.
I just haven't seen any of that. I'd be interested.
Again, while it isn't directly under the Parks and Recreation purview, actually, community development handles that because it's a development issue. It does have an impact on Parks and Recreation because it is a tourist activity that engages the riverfront, engages the Riverwalk, could potentially engage the boat dock. We're right, there's only that one Conrad property between us. And so I'm more than happy as information becomes available to see if someone from community development, there's really nothing to share at this point, but when there's more to share, I definitely think that would be something good for us to know, particularly in context of this bigger, broader master plan, because it is almost like a special use facility. At the end of the day, it's a museum. So, and it's going to have grounds that have things to do.
Yeah, and it could connect ultimately the Broderick Boat Ramp to that property and
Yes.
clean that up.
Yes, yeah. So opportunities abound.
Maybe some fishing docks.
Any other items that any commissioners would like to request? Seeing none, I think we're ready to adjourn the meeting, 8:29 PM. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.